Hello, good day everyone, and welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for taking time to be a part of this very important topic of discussion. My name is Dan Clark, and I'll be the presider of this webinar today. I'm a retired firefighter living here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I've spent the entirety of my career caring and helping people no matter their race, gender, religious affiliation, etc. So when asked to preside over this webinar, I of course did not hesitate because we all need to be a larger voice in this world fighting against persecution. There are so many examples of minority and human rights violations in our world today. We have the Black Lives Matter movement here in the United States, which evolved because of so many instances of injury and death being perpetrated against our African American community. There are also global examples of organizations using the coronavirus as a means to carry out persecution and scapegoating against groups of minorities. So we are doing this webinar to raise our voice against this type of scapegoating and human rights infringement. If people who are aware of this issue don't speak up and use every media and social media platform possible, there won't be any change. And thus, we need the voices of the expert panelists we've gathered here today to speak to this very urgent situation in hopes of reaching the various civil groups and governmental organizations to urge change. So with that, today's topic, of course, is post-COVID-19 era, minority and human rights. It's obviously a subject that needs more attention in our world at this time, with so many people negatively affected globally. Because of this virus, there seems to be more suffering at the hands of people persecuting others by using this virus as a scapegoat to carry out vendettas and hate-related actions. So going forward today, our speakers will be focused on the following topics. Number one, the problem of hatred towards minorities due to COVID-19 and how to solve it. Next, direction of human rights activities in the age of post-COVID-19. And third, how to improve the human rights of minorities. We want to let everybody know that the webinar is being recorded so it can be released to the media with the purpose of calling attention to this most important topic. Okay, I think our first speaker we want to introduce is Mr. Aftab Jehangir, who is a member of the National Assembly of Pakistan and Parliamentary Secretary for Ministry of Religious Affairs and Interfaith Harmony. And I believe that we've got a video from him. I don't think he will be live with us this morning.
Of Parliament, Karachi, Pakistan, is honored to be part of this seminar. Everyone everywhere, mainly mainstream media, has been addressing the fact that due to the global pandemic, economies and businesses have suffered greatly. However, with little attention has been paid towards basic human rights and rights of minorities in different countries during such times. I am here to shed some light on the impact COVID-19 has had on minorities worldwide. COVID has had a broad range of disproportionate and adverse impacts upon national, religious, and linguistic minority communities. Some groups have suffered higher death rates than other emergency measures, including lockdown, has had a profound impact on mainly migrants. Minorities in many countries are more likely to live in overcrowded housing conditions, making physical distancing and self-isolation more challenging. Limited digital access and parental education gaps may also make homeschooling more difficult. In many places, minorities are on the front line with at-risk and low-paid jobs such as cleaning, transport, and other services which leave them more exposed to the virus. Minority women in particular faced compound hardships. These are just a few of the many challenges that minorities have faced. Although the pandemic is still ongoing, countries have started to take promising measures to address the disproportionate impact on the members of minority groups. For example, Greece has allocated a sum to 98 municipalities in the country to provide potable drinking water in Roma communities. In Italy, municipalities have been requested to implement civil protection ordinance about urgent measures like food solidarity. Portugal announced that all foreigners with pending applications would be treated as permanent residents to ensure they have access to public services. In Pakistan, an NGO created an online survey for people to document and report discrimination arising from COVID-19. Although above responses are tailored to the context and experiences of particular locations, however, they can be taken as examples for the rest of the world to follow. To conclude, the pandemic has not yet ended. However, it is time to adapt and change our lives to adjust to this new normal, not forgetting our minority brothers and sisters.
And we want to thank FTOP for providing us that video, even though he couldn't be here today. We definitely want to thank him for his input from Pakistan. Okay, now we'll move on to our next speaker, Ms. Anna Stemu, and she is responsible for marketing and public relations to the Muslim Association of Greece and Coordination Organization. Ms. Tamu has also been highlighted in numerous news articles related to cultural and human rights related issues. So, hello, Anna. Welcome. Thank you for
Hello.
being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's very important, and I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you our European and Greek experience about the human rights under the impact of the pandemic. Unfortunately, this is an ongoing situation, so it is too early to say post-pandemic. Though we have participated already to conferences that have a title as post-pandemic, but unfortunately, especially on a social level, we are still standing at the edge of a cliff that can jeopardize the victories of the human rights movements right now. But before to focus to the minorities, to each case, to each country, we must see the dramatic common harm since the pandemic. The entire world is facing now economic recession, high rate unemployment, no benefit or chopped, diminished benefits for the people who suffer, since the welfare systems worldwide and the public health system are under extreme pressure. Europe is suffering from social inequalities that are widening since the pandemic. The rise of the extreme right-wing parties across the continent makes the life of the immigrants, the refugees, the others, people with different faiths, different than the predominant religions of each country, they make their lives unbearable. Europe now is trying to deal with the obvious systemic racism that comes up many times from governmental policies that are harming the very same foundation of the European Union. In my country, Greece, the main religion is the East Orthodox Christian Church. This is a dominant church, and we have a Muslim minority that is around 5% of the Greek population. I think now it is around 600,000 people, or maybe more, maybe 700,000. We have the Catholics, Roman Catholics, that are a small minority, but very, very old. They're just a few thousand people. The Jewish community that are very old communities, but they are shrinking dramatically due to the migration in order to seek for a better future. And we have a small evangelical church and several small groups that have no visibility. We have Protestant church and schools, but actually they are small minorities and not and face many challenges as well. All minorities are, I cannot put it more nicely, but they are undermined by the predominant church and the governments. They are supporting these policies because in my country we don't have a separation between state and church. That means that when we have minorities, the powerful the powerful's will is winning always. It is obvious that the interfaith dialogue does not exactly blossom in Greece. Let me tell you just also this thing that Athens is still the only European capital without an official mosque, a cemetery. Although Athens has general population of about 5 million people, half of the total population of the whole country, and the Muslims in the city exceeds 500,000. The excuses were many, but this is under the common logic of how the governments are treating the minorities. This brought Islamophobia rising, a lot of fear for the others, and I would not only narrow it down to Islamophobia. We are facing issues, all people that belong to minorities. Even if it is a Christian one, again, there are many prejudices and many challenges. To tell you the truth, the Muslims of Greece are living this reality that is very difficult, because with the Islamophobia rising, the media are supporting this. We have daily headlines and debates about how we deal with the minorities. We are not mature as a society, but many challenges like this are happening in the whole Europe. And unfortunately, the ultra-right parties and groups, they find a very fertile soil to poison the citizens through intimidation. And especially the word is the Islamization is the trend of Europe right now. Actually, this is not true. Let me focus a little for the pandemic. The first days of the pandemic, I will give you, this is this example, and I also saw today a headline about this. The first days of the pandemic, our media were bombarding the households that there were refugees that are invading the country in order to infect us all and conquer the land and our resources. Unfortunately, the populism in a period of deep recession is the worst weapon against social cohesion and human dignity. They are targeting all of us with smear in order to tame the public and tolerate all the austerity measures that are following. We are bombarded by austerity measures all over Europe right now. The mainstream media were struggling to prove that the Muslim religious duties were to blame for the COVID-19 outbreak in some specific villages of 2,000 people. In the moment that in Athens we had more than 500,000 Muslims who had no mass incidents. Under this situation, we understand that the COVID-19 is only an excuse for more segregation, for more exclusion, more oppression for the minorities. In a time of a crisis, where the vast population is scared for their family safety, the policies are taking advantage of this to take back what the human rights movements have gained all these decades, such as freedom of speech, of religion, about they are having problem with the labor legislation all over Europe, of decent living conditions. All of those are in jeopardy in the name of the COVID-19. This is why I'm here. This is why it is our duty to identify those phenomena. And there are many, many more. It is very, very difficult to analyze this. I give you a brief idea, just the context, but it's very important to identify those phenomena and record them in order to restore those rights, as those policies bring misery and distress to billions of people. Again, thank you for the opportunity to address you, and I will be open if you would like to ask me anything. Thank you very much.
Yes, Anna, thank you so much. And I do see a question in the chat already. Let's see. So this is from Sam. In Europe and Greece, are there some examples when state and religion becomes one and occurs human rights violations towards another organization? So what it sounds like is in the European Union, um, um, are there, because I think you said there is no deviation between state and religion. So are there issues have been but between the state and religious organizations, violations towards each other?
Unfortunately, um, this is correct. This is what is happening. I will give you an example. The priests are being paid by the governmental payroll, so they are civil servants. That does not apply for the other religions. Even Islam is and recognized by the constitution religion as the Catholics as well. They are, but they don't have the benefits of the official church. And when the official church does not wish something to happen for the other religions, does not happen. For example, they could very easily block law for a mosque. They said, we disagree, it will not happen. This is direct. There are others that are going through influences. They're lobbying, and the main church, they are protecting their own people, but this is, we're talking about 93% of the population. They're not intimidated by the minorities, but unfortunately they are mingling even with sometimes with the choice of who to elect for Minister of Education and Religions, because this is one. We have several and numerous issues like that, and that is why they are also mentioned in the yearly reports of European Union. Also, there's Islamophobia report that has some incidents that are, but also finding the United States Department annual report for religious freedoms and human rights for Greece. Every year, the Embassy of Greece is issuing a report, so it is very useful to. I don't have the link, but we can find it instantly. Where you can find more details how all these things are being recorded yearly.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
I think.
So if we can do another quick one, Anna. Somebody has asked, how has COVID-19 affected people with disabilities?
I am also a sign language interpreter, so I belong in the world of the disabilities as an interpreter. And I saw from the first hand how this, first of all, the people were very afraid and they had the lack of access. It was very difficult for them, and the lockdown was very stressful for them. But we all had to obey, because we had in Greece, especially, we had the lockdown for mid-March until mid-May. So it was very important. Also, the people with disabilities were confused. They did not have many information, only by television. So the deaf community needed more. Also, they needed some more benefits, but that could not happen because, as I said before, the welfare system and the health system were in their limits. So they were not prepared to all that. It was the fear that put us all on hold, but I don't know in the second phase how we will deal with that.
Interesting. Yes, great. Thank you for that answer, and those two questions were really fantastic. Thank you all for the audience. And Anna, we want to thank you for being with us today and giving your introspect. It was very valuable. Thank you so much. Okay. Our next speaker is Ms. Perugia Makanzu. She is a reporter of African News from the DRC. And we want to welcome Perugia to the webinar today to give her thoughts and introspect on this important topic. So just to let everybody know, we'll have an interpreter for Ms. Makanzu. as she is a French-speaking person. Hello, Perugia. Thank you so much for being here.
La crise de la COVID-19 en République démocratique du Congo est une situation malheureuse pour son peuple dans son ensemble, mais aussi pour une minorité en particulier.
The COVID-19 crisis in Democratic Republic of Congo is an unfortunate situation for its population, especially for minority groups.
Cette situation prend la nature triste car elle a aggravé des violations des droits humains dans tout le pays, surtout en ce qui concerne les minorités qui, selon plusieurs organisations, sont déjà en problème depuis longtemps.
According to several organizations, this pandemic has compounded the amount of human rights violations all over the country, mostly for minorities who were already facing many problems.
C'est dans ce cadre que nous partageons avec vous pendant cette conférence quelques éléments d'information récoltés auprès des médias et d'autres organisations sur la situation des droits de la personne handicapée et du peuple autochtone pygmée face à la crise de COVID-19 en République démocratique du Congo, suivi de quelques recommandations personnelles aux responsables ou au gouvernement du pays.
It is in this context that I would like to share with you information that I gathered from several medias and organizations regarding the rights of native Pygmy population and the ones of people with disability in DRC during COVID-19. I will also share a few personal recommendations I made to government officials.
Pour parler des peuples autochtones pygmées, nous notons que malgré quelques avancées retenues, les médias et certaines organisations rapportent que la COVID-19 a aggravé la situation précaire dans laquelle vivent ce peuple, déjà enclavé et dont leurs besoins ont souvent mis à l'écart par les dirigeants dans la prise en considération de leurs desiderata.
Although there has been some improvements in the protections of human rights of pygmies, research revealed that COVID-19 has worsened the precarious conditions of those people who were already living in isolation and whose needs are often neglected by leaders during their sessions.
Cette pandémie a renforcé la misère des pygmées à cause des restrictions de déplacement qui les empêchent d'effectuer leurs travaux habituels. En effet, Valentin Ngobo, président de l'association des pygmées de l'Okolama, dans la province de l'Équateur, s'est plaint de cet état de choses lors de la célébration de la Journée internationale des peuples autochtones le 9 août dernier.
This pandemic has increased the misery of pygmies because of the travel restrictions which prevent them from doing their daily activities. Indeed, Valentin Ngobo, president of the Pygmy Association of Lokolama in the province of the Equator, raised that issue on August the 9th during the celebration for the International Native Population Day.
Pour lui, les effets néfastes de la COVID-19 sont encore plus visibles dans les campements pygmées, déjà enclavés, mais aucune action du gouvernement est menée pour les secourir malgré leurs multiples plaidoyers.
For him, the negative impact of COVID-19 is even more visible in Pygmies camps, which are already located in remote places. Unfortunately, despite their multiple calls for help and actions, the government remained silent.
Ce peuple a demandé même au gouvernement de les intégrer et de prendre en compte leur connaissance des forêts dans la lutte contre la pandémie de la COVID-19, chose qui n'a pas été faite, et ils demeurent absents voire dans le comité multisectoriel de riposte contre cette pandémie, ce qui ne les plaît pas du tout.
Those people have even requested the government to integrate them in the fight against COVID-19 by using their knowledge of the forest and medicinal plants. Yet, here again, the offer was ignored and pygmies stay absent and unrepresented in the multisectoral Corona Retaliation Committee. This situation really displeases them.
De même que chez les peuples autochtones pygmées, les associations de droits des personnes handicapées renseignent qu'à ce jour, aucune d'elles ne fait partie du comité multisectoriel de lutte contre la COVID-19 en RDC, malgré leurs efforts et leurs demandes.
Similarly, the Associations for the Rights of People with Disabilities report that, to this day, and after multiple requests, they too do not have any representation in the multisectoral Corona Response Committee.
Les personnes handicapées se disent lésées par cette situation. Cependant, la Fédération nationale des personnes handicapées du Congo, la FENAFACO, regrette en outre qu'aucun programme spécifique de lutte contre la pandémie de la COVID-19 au milieu de personnes handicapées n'a été mis en place par le gouvernement congolais, malgré leurs multiples plaidoyers faits à ce sujet.
People with disabilities feel wronged by this situation. The National Federation of People with Disabilities deplored the unresponsiveness of the government and the non-existence of a special program for people with disabilities in the fight against COVID-19.
Même sur le plan sécuritaire, déclaré le coordonnateur de la FENAFACO à la presse au mois de juillet dernier, il n'y a aucun mécanisme de protection et de secours en faveur de cette catégorie de personnes.
Even on the security aspect, the coordinator of the National Federation of People with Disabilities declared during a press conference last month that there was no mechanism of protection or assistance for this category of people.
Pour les conditions des peuples pygmées, nous recommandons au gouvernement congolais de mettre à profit les connaissances forestières de ce peuple dans la lutte contre la dite pandémie pour permettre de faire régner l'égalité des droits des peuples dans le pays.
Hence, in the case of the Pygmy population, we recommend the Congolese government to officially use the forestry knowledge of the Pygmy people in the fight against COVID-19. This would ensure equality of rights for all people all over the country.
Pour les personnes vivant avec handicap, nous proposons la prise en compte et l'examination rapide de la proposition de loi portant sur la protection des personnes vivant avec handicap, faite par l'actuel ministre délégué chargé des personnes handicapées et autres personnes vulnérables.
Also, we urge the government to examine and approve the bill on the protection of disabled and vulnerable people proposed by the delegate minister in charge of the needs of people with disabilities.
Ainsi que la mise en place effective des mesures légales par l'État, suivie de la vulgarisation de la Convention internationale des droits des personnes vivant avec handicap. Je vous remercie.
And finally, the effective implementation of legal procedures by the state, followed by the popularization of the International Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Persia, very much for speaking to what is going on in Africa. And so we have one question in the chat. And so somebody's asking with the issue with the pygmies, what's the medical attention um, been given for the pygmies as far as COVID-related suffering? Has there been appropriate medical the medical community responding to the pygmy situation?
Donc, Parousia,
Oui.
on vous remercie pour votre discours et vous avez une question. La question c'est comment est-ce que le corps médical a pu apporter de l'aide aux pygmées durant cette pandémie?
À cette question, je dirais non parce que je n'ai rien vu, même pas entendu. Les corps médicaux devaient être soutenus et délégués par le gouvernement lui-même. Mais dans les éléments d'information que j'ai à ma possession, je ne trouve pas une action pareille pour soutenir le peuple pygmée.
The answer is no. She said that she wasn't able to find any data, article, even rumors that says that the government is doing anything to help the pygmies. Technically, if we want doctors and nurses to go and help them, the government has to create a special program for that so that they can actually access their location, which has not been done and is not even on the way of being done.
Thank you. Sounds definitely like an action that needs to be taken. Okay, well, thank you so much, Perugia, for speaking with us today and giving that great information on what's going on in Africa.
Merci, Parousia.
Je vous remercie.
She said thank you.
Thank you.
J'ai beaucoup de questions.
Okay. Fascinating. So it looks like our next speaker will be Dr. Ibrahim Syed. He's a former professor of medicine at the University of Louisville School of Medicine and president of the Islamic Research Foundation International Incorporated. Dr. Syed is a past recipient of the Muslim Journal Muslim Civilization Advancement Award, the Robert A. Miller Diversity Award, and the American Board of Radiology Diversity Award. So we want to welcome Dr. Syed. Thank you for being with us today, sir.
I would like to start by highlighting the case of persecution of a minority Muslim religious group in New Delhi. Prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, there already existed hatred of the Muslim minority. In late March, it was determined that many new cases of COVID-19 were connected to the event in the Markaz building you are seeing. The event had been held by the Tablighi Jamaat, one of many Islamic minority groups. On March 22nd, the gates of the building were closed with 2,500 worshippers remaining inside. Authorities blamed the group for the spread of the virus, likely because blaming an already hated minority helped focus the anger of the public on a target they believed it was intentionally responsible. Many people were transported directly to quarantine facilities. It was 4 days later that screening of the people inside the building started, which was a day after the nationwide lockdown was instituted. How can a responsible government blame victims of an unseen contagion for spreading it, when the people involved have no knowledge of their being carriers, inciting public anger because the public wants to believe it, and to divert public's anger away from the government, which has to date been powerless to protect the people? It is just irresponsible. Up until the nationwide lockdown, the central government was still allowing foreigners from the hotspot nations like Malaysia and Indonesia to enter India. The government in India has demonstrated a level of Islamophobia that has revealed itself many times. Many of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party leaders have called the religious gathering Corona terrorism, and a central minister called the Markaz gathering a Tablighi crime, a Taliban crime. According to a report in Times Magazine, the tweets with hashtag Corona Jihad appeared nearly 300,000 times and potentially seen by 165 million people since March 28. Religious nationalism is the relationship of nationalism to a particular religious belief, dogma, or affiliation. This relationship can be broken down into two aspects: the politicization of religion and the influence of religion on politics. When the government implements policy and enforces with a religious bias, it is displaying religious nationalism. When Hindu youth gangs are allowed to roam Muslim neighborhoods, the police are cooperating with religious nationalism, especially when they ignore or cooperate in the violence perpetrated on the community. Religious nationalism was demonstrated yet again when they justified a separate column of cases related to the Tablighi Jamaat in daily briefings on the new cases. As it is very difficult to differentiate between the Tablighi and other sects of Muslims, all are now shunned and hated. In a city the size of New Delhi, there are a great number of large gatherings going on daily, yet other gatherings were not treated equally with testing and contact tracing. But in January and March, nearly 1.5 million people were allowed to enter without proper screening. The media also engages in religious nationalism. This image was published in March. It would also like to export the ideology to the rest of the world. To incite more hatred, the media has taken to visuals to show the process they believe to be intentional. Between March 18 and 19, some Hindu temples had upwards of 10,000 visitors in the state of Gujarat. In Punjab, 40,000 people were quarantined after a man died who had attended a Sikh religious festival. Factitious does not come into play when the decision is made to spin the narrative to a certain way. The media claims, combined with endemic prejudice, have exposed members of minority groups to hate speech and violence, arbitrary denial of service, along with various forms of exclusion. A number of states are taking specific measures to address the disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on members of minority communities. Many of the measures are educational, but some provide additional resources and services. The United Nations has adopted the Rabat Plan of Action, which stresses that political and religious leaders should refrain from incitement and also have crucial role to play in speaking out firmly and promptly against intolerance, stereotyping, and hate speech. Their action or inaction can have immediate and lasting consequences. Another initiative that has been adopted by the United Nations is the Beirut Declaration of Faith for Rights, which is also useful in developing a good perspective to view the issues we are addressing today. These documents should be used by municipalities all over the world to inform legal governance. My personal recommendations are: implement mitigation measures to ensure the basic minimums related to food, medicine, PPE, water, and sanitation. Gather accurate evidence and develop and distribute policies and procedures that do not divide people. Ensure the most vulnerable are reached, value their souls. Share information in a responsible way with all communities served. Raise awareness through all means necessary. Target socio-economic measures, including emergency financial aid, to equalize all society's ability to weather this pandemic. Address the specific risks faced by the young girls and women. Ensure policies are not biased or exclusionary. Promote appreciation and respect for diversity while supporting human dignity. Follow the initiatives in the Rabat Plan and the Faith for Rights Declaration, provide the technological support needed during the pandemic for remote meetings, include representative minorities in the process I have outlined, and we're all in this together. Thank you.
Great suggestions, and we hope there are people out there listening to those. We do have a couple questions. Let's see. Have there been any instances of physical persecution or violence against the Muslim minority?
Yes, in February 2020, when President Trump was visiting Delhi, there was a huge violence. And in that, 53 lives were lost. 36 of them were Muslims and 15 of them were Hindus. A lot of property was damaged. And this persecution of Muslims goes on every day. They incite the Muslims to say Jai Ram, that's the Hindu god Ram, and to support Modi, and to worship the cow or drink the urine of the cow, and they use the cow dung as medicine. So there's a lot of worship and lynching also. A lot of Muslims are lynched, stating that they were eating the beef meat. So the cow is sacred to the Hindus, but even though they are eating lamb and mutton, they are blamed that they are eating the beef, and they are lynched for those things without verification. So this goes on every day. There's nothing new. The persecution of the minorities.
And has it been worse because of the COVID-19?
Exactly.
I'm assuming yes from your presentation. Absolutely.
Right. So they say that the spread of COVID-19 in India is because of the Muslims, particularly the Tablighi Jamaat people. So this is even exacerbated by the TV channels, which are 9 or 10. They support the government of India, and they do not see objectively. They are subjective, because if they go against the government, and their channel is closed, and they will be put into the jail. So that's why they had to toe behind the government. So there is no objective studies. Very subjective. Just simply they support the government.
Right. So it sounds like the government, that was one of the other questions. It doesn't sound like the government is doing very much to intervene.
No, not at all. For example, the New Delhi riots, the Prime Minister of India never visited. Compared to New Zealand, last year 51 Muslims were killed in 2 mosques. The Prime Minister, Jacinda, she went to the mosque. She hugged the devotees, and also she went to the parliament and declared that the guns, the automatic weapons, were banned right away, and that has not been done in the United States. And she's so sympathetic and so caring, and I want people, the leaders, political leaders like her, whenever something bad happens, they should go and visit the area. The Prime Minister of India not even sympathize on the TV or on the radio. He just ignored. The minority persecution is simply ignored by the Prime Minister of India. He never sympathizes with them. And also, India is a secular country. Now they are making it as a Hindu, religious, theocratic country. It's now called Hindutva. That's like Nazism in Germany.
Okay. Well, we thank you so much again, Dr. Syed, for being here and being with us and shedding more light on what's going on globally. Thank you. Okay. Well, our next speaker, we wanted to announce that, let everybody know in the audience that we have almost 150 people attending the webinar today, including some journalists, So we want to thank everybody for being here with us today and attending. Great of you to spend your Saturday with us. So our next speaker is Imran Yusuf. He is president of Christian Coordination Council of Pakistan.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to present my gratitude to Pakistan Minorities Alliance, Mr. Tahir Naveed Chaudhry, James, and the whole team for giving me this opportunity to speak on such an important topic. As we all know that the world is facing unprecedented crisis due to the pandemic of COVID-19. The pandemic has caused a great impact on our economic, social, and political lives. The virus COVID-19 has raised many questions about the health facilities of the different countries, and especially the developing countries. We have seen the level of education and the level of awareness about the preventive measures and the condition of protective equipments. In view of the exceptional situation and to preserve life, governments have no choice. They have to adopt extraordinary measures. The priority should be to save lives. If we talk about the Pakistan and the other developing countries, there was a big question about the lockdown because most of the population and especially the minority groups are related to daily wages, laborers, and small businesses. In Pakistan, when we talk about the minority, especially the Christian minority, they are related to sanitary workers or low-paid jobs. So the government had the pressure whether to keep the strict lockdown or to ease the lockdown restrictions. Extensive lockdowns were adopted to slow down the transmission of the virus, but it has affected the freedom of movement and freedom to enjoy many other human rights. There is a question that observing the crisis and its impact through a human rights lens puts a focus on how it is affecting people on the ground and how it is affecting the vulnerable groups and what can be done. If we talk about the developing countries, the ratio of unemployment and food insecurity has gone up. Closure of the schools has interrupted the education of the children, and the rate of domestic violence has also gone upward. But this is not a time to neglect human rights and minorities' rights. It is a time when more than ever human and minority rights are needed. As the UN General Secretary said, our shared human condition and values must be a source of unity, not division. We must give people hope and vision of what the future can hold. The human rights system helps us to meet the challenges, opportunities, and needs of the 21st century, to reconstruct relations between people and leaders, and to achieve the global stability, solidarity, pluralism, and inclusion on which we all depend. It points to the ways in which we can transform hope into concrete action with real impact on people's life. It must never be a pretext for power or politics. It is above both. I think government should deploy the maximum resources to combat the spread of disease and to guarantee the human rights of minorities and vulnerable groups. The governments should adopt the following measures within their available resources. Provision of emergency water supplies to slum areas and to minorities communities. Number 2, suspension of housing evictions for unpaid rent during the crisis. Number 3, preserving jobs through targeted economic measures. Number 4, providing emergency shelter for the homeless. Number 5, expanding domestic violence responses for victims of abuse. And number 5, by using technology, maintaining online help desks or quick response centers. In this critical situation, guaranteeing human rights for everyone is a great challenge. But we all know that civil rights, human rights, and minority rights are obligations which states must abide by. Thank you very much.
Suggestions are obviously the way every government should be operating, keeping everything transparent, and, provide services for everybody. There are a couple questions for you. Let's see. One is, how have domestic violence cases been handled by law enforcement? Is there a way to report them and provide shelter for anyone seeking help?
In Pakistan, we have different acts about regarding the domestic violence, but there is a big question that we have many kind of acts, but we need the implementation of these acts. Until we don't implement properly the acts and laws and rules, there is a big question on the law then again. So we have to bring that laws into our homes and domestic level. We can educate people. We have to educate people for the domestic violence. We have a different kind of culture in Pakistan. We can say the male dominant culture here, and here males, they don't feel it's a crime or it's a violation of law beating women or daughters or females at home. So it is the government's responsibility to educate, not only to make laws and constitutions. It is very important to educate people regarding the laws.
Everything because of COVID-19, has reopening helped low-income citizens?
Yes, there was a big question for government also that they should let the people die with the starvation or let the people die with the virus. Because many of the people and most of our population, they belongs to a daily wager. They are laborers. So government should ease the restriction of lockdowns with very careful SOPs.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you, Imran, for being here and speaking to everyone today.
Thank you very much.
Very insightful and great information. Thank you. Okay. Our next speaker is Yevgeny Zovtis, and he is a director of the Kazakhstan International Bureau for Human Rights and Rule of Law.
I want to thank the organizers for this opportunity to share some information about the situation with the rights of minorities in Kazakhstan and some neighboring countries before the pandemic, which is relevant during the pandemic and could be expected after the pandemic will be over. I'm representing Kazakhstan International Bureau for Human Rights and the Rule of Law, the largest non-governmental human rights organization in Central Asia, more than 40 people in staff, most of whom are lawyers, which was established in 1993. The organization is focused on promoting political rights and civil freedoms, including the right not to be discriminated on any grounds: political, ethnic, religious, gender, or other. I think that COVID touched upon not only social, but political issues as well. And I'll divide my speech into 4 small parts. First, Kazakhstan is a former Soviet republic trapped between Russia and China. These 2 geopolitical giants with typical authoritarian regimes are directly or indirectly influencing Kazakhstan as politically as economically. In Kazakhstan, we also do have an authoritarian regime and the same post-Soviet elite in power. Only last year, the first president of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, stepped down after being in power for about 30 years. But he still keeps strong political influence, being a chairman of the Security Council, the member of the Constitutional Council, and the head of the ruling party. There is practically no any significant political opposition, as opposition is not represented neither in the parliament nor in local legislatures. There are very few printed outlets and websites, and practically no independent radio or TV channels. The civil society is under control. Civic activists, human rights defenders, and independent journalists are under permanent pressure and surveillance. Dozens of politically motivated trials take place, and we have a long list of political prisoners, including those who were prosecuted on religious grounds. The Kazakhstan legislation related to political parties, trade unions, media, peaceful assemblies and associations, public organizations, and religion is very repressive and raised serious concerns of UN Human Rights Council, UN treaty bodies, special procedures, International Labour Organization, European Union, and Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Thus, we could say that there is a clear evidence of discrimination of people on political grounds. Second, Kazakhstan is a country with a very diverse population. The majority of the population are Kazakhs, about 70%, who are Muslims, and there are about 100 other ethnic groups, including Russians, Uzbeks, Koreans, Uyghurs, Dungans, Kurds, Poles, Chechens, some of whom are Christians or forming neo-Christian religious groups, and others are not following traditional Sunni Islam, representing other Islamic teachings. The non-Sunni Islam groups are under the permanent pressure of prosecution. The same could be said about neo-Christian groups, as Russian Orthodox Church looks like officially supported religion for Slavic population, and the government is directly or indirectly opposing proselytism. Thus, some religious minorities are facing a real pressure. Third, in the last couple of years, there were a number of ethnic conflicts, including in February this year, in rural areas in south of the country between Kazakhs and Dungans, which left more than 10 people dead, dozens injured, and a number of homes and cars burned down. The government response was not adequate. In June 2020, the Committee on Interethnic Relations was established under the Ministry of Information and Social Development. But Kazakhstan does not have any anti-discriminatory legislation, no anti-discrimination institutions or procedures. And it was severely criticized by UN Human Rights Council, UN Committee on Human Rights, Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, Committee on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion, independent expert on national minorities who visited Kazakhstan. For more than 10 years, this strong criticism, unfortunately, of lack of this legislation, unfortunately, nothing changed. And fourth, another serious problem relates to the neighboring China. In particular, the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, where mostly Muslims, including Kazakhs and Uyghurs, are living. The so-called political education camps in this region, where hundreds of thousands or even more than 1 million of Kazakhs and Uyghurs are held, looks like prisons where the rights of Muslim minorities are gravely violated. Keeping in mind that Kazakhs are the major ethnic group in Kazakhstan, And Uyghurs are also a rather big ethnic community in our country, which, by the way, does not have any statehood anywhere. We could imagine the psychological difficulties for people of Kazakhstan to address this issue, besides anything else, because of political, military, and economic strength of China. All these four issues of concern are becoming even more disturbing, as the pandemic will have a strong negative effect on the Kazakhstan national economy in coming months and even years. And we could expect that interreligious, interethnic relations and political situation will worsen and could lead to potential conflicts. This is my general overview of the situation, which should be addressed urgently. But I want to finish with one consideration. What makes me rather pessimistic are the four enemies of democracy and human rights in the modern world. As I named them, these are oil, gas, war on terror, and geopolitical considerations. All four, unfortunately, are present in my country. And it looks like these enemies are more and more strong, especially in the West. And pandemic provides these enemies even more fertile soil to flourish. And it looks like internal affairs will govern the policy of developed countries in post-COVID future and will provide less attention to the human rights causes in other countries, including rights of minorities. And this is what makes me, unfortunately, not so optimistic. I'm ready to answer any questions. Thank you.
I think we probably share with you a lot of your opinions on that. But we do want to ask a couple questions. One of them is, how do the Kazakh people generally think about the rights of ethnic minority and religious minority, given the complexity and diversity
First
of the
of all, we
cultures
have to keep
represented?
in mind that it is post-Soviet country, that the Soviet Union creates certain kind of, maybe not legislative, but more cultural diversity, and there was some kind of habits to live in the common society with the so-called, or probably with the good relations between the religions and ethnic groups. The problem is that it was by the communist ideology. When it collapsed, we are living in the new world. We are living in the new system. And in that regard, of course, there is some kind of tension, especially from the side of two major religious groups like Sunni Islam and Russian Orthodox Church, and between the majority of Kazakh population and other ethnic minorities. And this tension, unfortunately, is growing because of the lack of democratic tools, procedures, institutions, and space. And this creates some challenges in the future.
Yes, and so you see the coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic, exacerbating,
for sure, because
making it
because
worse?
when you have the decreasing space for economical and social, let's say, so involvement, if you see the shrinking economy, the people start to look around whom to blame for. And that's some these events in February to a certain extent were linked to that. And I'm expecting that it will, to a certain extent, the pandemic will exacerbate that for sure.
Yes. Well, we definitely look for a better world in this post era. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your work that you do. And Evgeny, thank you so much for being here with us today and shedding light on what's going on in your part of the world, Kazakhstan. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to Eldon Jones. And Eldon is a peace activist and pastor of Evangelical Protestant Church here in Louisville, Kentucky. Welcome, Eldon. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on these issues of global importance. My colleagues have been very eloquent in outlining the issues before us, and I would remind our audience that this is a global issue faced in all nations, not just the small number of examples shown today. The problems we are discussing today are not new problems, but have been brought into sharp focus by the pandemic. I thought it might be helpful to bring to bear quotes from famous leaders of the past who have addressed what we're addressing today. This from a speech from past US President Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife, shortly after World War II. She said, and I quote, "We must not be confused about what freedom is. Basic human rights are simple and easily understood. Freedom of speech and a free press, freedom of religion and worship, freedom of assembly and the right of petition, the right of men to be secure in their homes and free from unreasonable search and seizure, and from arbitrary arrest and punishment." These next words are from the famous "I Have a Dream" speech of Martin Luther King. "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." Emmeline Pankhurst gave a speech titled "Freedom or Death" during the height of the women's suffrage movement. She said, "Human life for us is sacred. But if we say any life is to be sacrificed, it shall be ours. We won't do it ourselves, but we will put the enemy in the position where they will have to choose between giving us freedom or giving us death." I particularly like the elevated level of commitment she suggested that moves us from the merely having an opinion about civil rights to actually being willing to place ourselves in vulnerable positions to stand in the breach, taking a leadership role, if you will. Harold Maximilian spoke these words to the South African Parliament in a time of social turmoil. His speech was titled "The Winds of Change." "The winds of change is blowing through this continent, and whether we like it or not, this growth of national consciousness is a political fact. We must all accept it as a fact, and our national policies must take account of it." I would like to reword that for today. The wind of change is blowing through this world, and whether we like it or not, this growth of international consciousness is a political fact. We must all accept it as a fact, and our international policies must take account of it. I have a particular interest in a case of religious persecution in the country of Korea. This is largely directed at Shincheonji Church, one of the minor Bible-based religious groups in South Korea. I'm aware of this due to my now 6-year involvement with the HWPL organization, which is chaired by the same leader as the Shincheonji Church. Shincheonji Church has received a lot of persecution and discrimination from the mainstream churches because they are a minority. It has resulted in loss of jobs, alienation from their family, friends, and even death. Their freedom of religion has not been protected, and the NGO, HWPL, has been threatened with their government charter being revoked as a byproduct of the persecution of Shincheonji Church. I find this so hard to fathom, that an organization that has been promoting peace on a global level has garnered support from the world's political leaders, as well as from all the organized religions of the world, who are uniting with the goal of international laws being established to actually outlaw war. Man-Hee Lee, having fought personally in the Korean War, saw firsthand how innocent young people die for the ambitions of political leaders. He and his organization have been relentless in the pursuit of this injustice being eliminated. I have personally attended the World Peace Summit events held in the Olympic Stadium in Seoul, South Korea, and have seen that this work of peace is a work of peace that has never been done on this world scale. Many have cried out for peace. Man-Hee Lee's organization is giving feet to the dream. I want to ask the political leadership of Korea, how can you possibly believe Mr. Lee and his two organizations had any wrong motives? And further, how could they have known their people had become infected and thus prevent their people from passing on something they themselves did not know they were carrying? Shincheonji members who are infected are also victims of COVID-19. That should be protected and taken care of, not become further victimized. Clearly, scapegoating is taking place because they feel someone or some organization should be blamed when the government has not been effective in providing safety. Clearly, this is a global problem that has nothing to do with Mr. Man-Hee Lee and his organizations. All of us around the world who have a great deal of respect for Mr. Lee's integrity ask for true justice to be done in this case of obvious persecution. I'd like to read you some words of Man-Hee Lee concerning peace. These are his words. "We are the messengers of peace, born in this era with the mission of building a peaceful world and to leave it as a legacy to future generations. Let us fulfill this duty by putting in concerted efforts into the Declaration of Peace and Cessation of War, the DPCW is abbreviated for that, to be implemented as an international law to achieve true peace across the globe. Then we will be able to leave a world of peace as a lasting legacy to our children. This is a shared goal of humanity and the way to realize sustainable peace that mankind has been hoping for." Lastly, I would like to bring you words from a Holocaust survivor, Eli Wiesel, and this is titled "The Perils of Indifference." He spoke this before President Clinton 20 years ago. "Indifference elicits no response. Indifference is not a response. Indifference is not a beginning, it is an end. And therefore, indifference is always the friend of the enemy, for it benefits the aggressor, never his victim, whose pain is magnified when he or she feels forgotten. The political prisoner in his cell, the hungry children, the homeless refugees. Not to respond to their plight, not to relieve their solitude by offering them a spark of hope, is to exile them from human memory. And in denying their humanity, we betray our own." Thank you. Now, the way in which we depart this meeting will perhaps set in motion new initiatives toward the leveling up of society and bringing an end to prejudices based on lack of understanding. I believe the international conversation has only begun, and perhaps the audience can give us their perspective and initiatives to pursue. You know, in thinking about the work of HWPL and their dialogues of scripture that I participate in, I am wondering if a similar vehicle could be brought to bear in communities around the world. HWPL has brought unity among different religions, allowing them to see how much they had in common, as opposed to view all specifically their differences. And such a moderated dialogue needs to take place at the intersection between the government control forces and the larger public and the minority groups, that meaningful solutions can be put in place at local levels. And I think that is an organized structure that should be created. Thank you for the opportunity again to participate in such meaningful work. And I thank the audience for your patient attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Eldon, for your participation in that peace movement. As we spoke to Yevgeny, we definitely need more opportunities for hope. We do have one question, and let's see. Well, we've got two, three. It says, you mentioned problems being brought to the attention due to the pandemic. Was this group marginalized before the pandemic?
Actually, yes. Due to the theology they present, it causes existing Bible-speaking churches to treat them as they would the COVID-19 virus. And actually, this treatment has been going on for at least 30 years.
Okay, and then we'll do one more. What role has the media played in the accusing of this minority group as a scapegoat, as you mentioned?
The media?
Yes. What role did the media play, if any?
Well, the media's role is of getting and keeping people's attention, and doing so justifies their existence. However, media's use of their ethical compass could be called into question. Correct use could moderate the level at which they incite division in the world's conflicts. In other words, the media has not been a force for promoting unity.
Yes, that definitely seems to be true. There's more divisive tactics, seems like, being used in the media today.
Well, it gets more attention.
Absolutely, absolutely. But thank you again for your work in that peace movement. We hope to hear more about that for sure. And thank you for being with us today.
It was my pleasure.
Okay, we would like to bring back our host, Mr. Tahir Naveed Chaudhry. And let me give a little bit, as we bring up the slide, we want to make sure we get his personal attributes out there. He is the chairman and founder of Pakistan Minorities Alliance, the PMA, former member of Punjab Assembly, and lawyer of Rimsha Masih, a Pakistani girl accused of blasphemy in 2012. So hello again, Mr. Tahir Naveed. We thank you so much for being here and supporting our effort and being the host.
Sorry for
through the PMA.
You know that the connections of internet is not good here in Pakistan. Really thankful everyone who are participating here, and especially thanks the speakers on the behalf of all Pakistan Minorities Alliance and my sister organization, Muslim Association of Greek and Youth Participations and Intercultural Dialogue of Turkey. And we all are here because all are human beings, and to protect the human rights, it's our duty. And every religion emphasizes on the human rights. Likewise, when we see in Islam, there is also the rights of God, Allah is forgiven, but the rights of human being will not forgiven. And likewise, in Christianity, we can see Jesus said, you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. And being the minority rights is actually the human rights. And when the pandemic is the start, the UN Secretary General says that he warned the pandemic is a public health emergency, and that is becoming a public human rights crisis. And we feel this is also a human rights crisis also. The rights to equality and non-discriminated are the foundation of international human rights law. We can see the Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights proclaims that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, while the Article 2 is also states that everyone is entitled to human rights and freedom without distinctions of any kind. And being the chairman of Pakistan Minorities Alliance, we are working for the minorities. And where there is the minority rights is violation, PMA stands for that. And as the Pakistanis minorities, as the Imran Yusuf speaker is briefly told that minorities of Pakistan is also very in low incomes. They are working on daily wages like sanitary workers, domestic workers, and bricks cleans workers and bonded labor, and their income is very low. And due to this COVID-19, they face many hardships. Actually, minority where they're in the world, they are groups who are in small numbers, and minorities also somewhere is due to religion and creed and color, and they are in small numbers and they are also less privileged. And due to the COVID-19, they feel many hardships. In Pakistan, we see in this era, the government announced some the help to the all citizens of Pakistan, but there is many discriminated with the minorities. Likewise, the mostly help out from this Zakat fund. Zakat fund is only for the Muslims, but not for the non-Muslims. And likewise, we can see in this period, the on government level, we salute the doctors and nurses and paramedical staff, and there is also staff of clinic staff, we can say sanitary workers. They have not the proper kits, the proper the uniform, and also they work in the quarantine centers, and when they go back to home, they are infected and their family is also infected. And I observed that likewise, there was also human rights violation in Myanmar, and who is the Muslim persecuted there. It's Buddhist country, and Uyghur Muslims in China, and likewise Kashmir issues in India, like Dr. Ibrahim briefly stated that about the Indian Muslims, also the Christian minority in India also persecuted. And also the Mr. Eldon is briefly says that about the persecution of HWPL and Shintanji Church. I also have a strong relation and close relation with the South Korea, and I visited more than 7 times. And I greatly impressed by the peace efforts of the HWPL throughout the world. And I think as the chairman of HWPL also lead the Church of Shintanji, and it's a small organization of church. And there is a many biggest organization, a church, who are persecuted them. And when the pandemics start, they blame that the coronavirus is spread by the Shintanji. But it's totally wrong, because of the other responsible are denying their duties. And this way, they blames to the Shintanji that the coronavirus is spread in South Korea by the Shintanji. And when we see back in the history, we can see when there was a fire broke in the Rome, and some people come forward to extinguish the fire, but the Emperor Nero promoted to blaming Christian. And likewise, when we see the hatred toward Jews spread in Germany from massacre, Hitler used this bloodshed massacre for political reason. And when we say the all religion based on the human rights, and it's being the human rights activist, we all are here, which we have the pain for the human being. It's I think it's our duty that we work together for these challenges where there is the human rights is violation in Myanmar, in China, in India, in South Korea, where there is it is violated, we should stand with them. It's difficult and risky, and many prominent people who work for the human rights, they stand for this cause. And I think it's our a small effort of Pakistan Minorities Alliance, PMA, and other organization in this era. We invite you, and we are really thankful for your all the valuable suggestions, your valuable speeches, and your precious time you give on this noble cause. And we intend that we should be continued and connected with each other and work for the human rights and minority rights. And I already said actually the minority rights is the human rights. And being a human being, it's our duty that we stand where there is the minority rights and human rights is violated. And again, I am thankful to all of you for your all the efforts you are doing, and also you give your most precious time to join us in this webinar. Thank you very much.
Much for those words, and also, of course, being the host of the PMA for this webinar. And it seems that from every speaker today, that this issue of minority and human rights was obviously happening way before COVID-19. And I think we have all learned that this pandemic has only made things worse. The delineations between people get wider, and so we expect governmental intervention to some degree, but it doesn't seem like there is that platform from the government to try to get to everybody, right? To clean up or clear up those human and minority rights issues. So we definitely hope by what we did today and what we will do in the future with another webinar that we can continue to develop these actions. As we've heard a couple speakers say, and then somebody in the chat has said as well, what do the actions need to be going forward? How can we help? So we surely thank you for hosting, and we obviously thank all the speakers for being here and giving us that introspect into what is going on in their part of the world. So we also, again, want to let everybody know that there will be another webinar. We're developing that right now, and so hang on for more information. And we've gained so much information today about the global issue of minority and human rights. And it is our hope that everyone watching can take this information and make a more vocal public stance at this time. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for being here, speakers, Mr. Tahir, thank you, and everyone involved. We do want to invite all the speakers and to Mr. Tahir, of course, that we are going to have that post webinar get together, and that link, the Zoom link, can be found in your email. So unless there's any other questions from our speakers, we can end our webinar, and we can, the speakers and admin can move into the post-webinar room. Thank you, everyone, once again, for helping us get this word out, being more vocal. Thank you.